So I will. How do we want to start this? I know that you have some opinions about individualism. So if you want to go over those real quick to start, so we're on the same page, that'd be awesome.
Well, I'm going to do this here if I can. I guess I'm stepping out of frame here. I apologize for that. But, this was my first book, right? My first book was called Selfhood and Authenticity. And, Charles Taylor, that's the first chapter, right? Taylor is critical of the contemporary culture of authenticity because he sees it as emerging on two fronts. There are the boosters and then there's the knockers. They're the people who are all for some poetic license and the individual's prerogative to make a meaningful life. And then there are the knockers who see this as a license for sloth and indulgence and, I guess in some way, a self-pandering kind of cult. From my own perspective, I'm not either a booster or a knocker. I would try to get at what do we mean by the person. I think you want to make room for what Bakhtin calls once occurrence, that is the non-repeatability. But it's not individualism as over against sociality. I think what happens is too many people, they make it seem as if I'm an individual over against the society. But the point would be that you're always an individual as a unique configuration of society. That is, you're never unique in a non-social way.
All right. Not unique in a non-social way would be like, give me an example.
You're never unique in a non-social way. That is, what makes you unique is your unique social relations. Like the fact that you and I know each other, the fact that you have the particular parents you do, the particular relatives you do, the particular spatial temporal location, that's what makes you unique. It's not something that's over against society. It's the embeddedness within society.
All right. So then when you take a look at what, I don't know, what's apparent today, do you see a lot of individualism that you would warn people against? And for what reason, if you do?
Well, I mean, I think to that extent, I'm kind of in agreement with Taylor that I think there are some people who are boosting. See, they're not boosting the self that I'm after. So, and to that extent, I'm critical of what sort of Taylor's saying. But I do think there are lots of people who they think that they want to be an individual. They think they want to think for themselves and do their own thing, but they've never even noticed that that is a cliche they've gotten from other people. They've been talked into the belief of thinking for themselves. I mean, they sound like a broken record. It's almost comical.
Can one think for oneself?
What's that?
Can one think for oneself?
No, it doesn't even make any sense. It's a stupid idea.
Really?
It doesn't make sense at all. Yes.
Well, explain why.
Who invents their own language? No one. Every person learns to speak a language that then they've appropriated from others. If anything, you learn to attack it from within and make it your own, but it's never in a non-social way.
Now, is language, though, the thought or the means to the thought? If it's the means to the thought, then one could possibly be thinking for oneself and just do it in the mode of one particular language.
You just used language as if you were referring to something other than language. That is, you said there was some thought stuff, and then there was the means for the expressing of that. But that very division that you used was made possible by the language that you used. Could you have made that division by just the thought? I would tell you no. That is, you are now standing on resources and making available to yourself thoughts that were made possible because other people. The language that you're speaking is the oldest thing you've been in contact with all day.
Well, now, if it's true that all of my thoughts were merely inherited, then whence is thought at all if it was merely inherited?
See, no, we're missing here. Again, you got to go back to the notion of once occurrence and unique constellation of social relations. There is a sense in which every thought is unique. I mean, just be unable to remember something, and you'll feel the sense that coming up with the thought was accomplishing a thought, right? I mean, there is this sense. How do I say it? I mean, a different way to say it is it's a stupid goal to try to have an original thought then, because all thought's original thought. I mean, Don't you
All
see?
right.
The whole point is that people have a motive, and the point is that
Mm-hmm.
we're animals who are, I think, in a lot of ways, motivated by things, and it's honest, but like laziness and self-indulgence and ease and comfort. And then when that becomes the lie, when instead of people say, well, basically I'm lazy and I'm seeking comfort, and so I'm not going to read, I'm not going to open to history, I'm not going to go to the library because I'm lazy and I just want to be self-satisfied, but instead they get on a high horse and they say, well, I want to think for myself. Why do I have to read? Why do I have to learn about ideas of history? I just want to think for myself. I've heard people tell me that they don't need to hear what a bunch of dead people think. And I think, how do you even know what they think? You're an idiot. This is so, and the
Well,
person got that from other people. I refuse to believe that that person came up with that idea on their own. They didn't. I've heard so many people claim they want to think for themselves, and that itself, that idea, that expression, they've taken from other people.
but if that's true, then what need is that filling? Why would they take that from someone else? What's the motivation there? Is it merely because they are lazy and they want to just be flippant, or is there something else? Is there really
Yeah, it's the
something?
warm smell of the herd. They're actually trying to fit in more than be unique. They're trying to fit into contemporary American individualism. Exactly. It's so
Is that
apparent.
true? Is that
Yes.
true? Well,
Yes.
I mean, if I was to
They're
fit
wearing it
into,
like a fashion. Beliefs are like fashions, and people express their beliefs to fit in.
well, I tell you what, if I was to read a lot of, say, Skinner, I could fit into a particular group, even here on YouTube. If I was to read about any of those guys that you might suggest to your students, I could find my own social niche with people who say that they're either Ayn Rand people, or they are Hegel people, or they are Aristotle people, or they are whatever. I think
Okay?
I think if the motivation is really to fit in, I think that can be achieved in doing precisely what you would propose. But if they are trying to, if they're saying that, oh, they don't have to read those old dead people, you might be right in saying that's just laziness. And they don't want to read stuff because it is difficult to read old dead people's writing, oftentimes because it's just in a different style. But I wonder if it is a call to individuality or if it is something else. I guess I don't know.
I mean, my sense of it would be that I was sitting with my colleague who was close to retiring. This was some years ago. And he's a brilliant, brilliant man. He's introduced me to many great ideas. And I looked at him at one point in his office, and I said, Robert, what would your mind have been like had you never read anything? And he looked at me, and then he just started laughing. And then we both just laughed. There was a sense in which he had accomplished and achieved an utterly unique mind, but it was won and it was earned by resolving the unresolved arguments of the authors of all the great ideas in Western thought, that he read so much that he couldn't pick sides with any of them. He'd sort of bobble around and go, well, if I were Nietzsche, and I'd sort of see it this way, but if I was coming in from Hegel, and if Kierkegaard would come in at different, he was so immersed in it that he actually was thinking for himself because he couldn't agree with any of them, but could use all of them for resources. Many people who supposedly want to think for themselves, if they don't adopt those resources, it's sort of like, what conversation are they in? Do they want the prerogative to set the parameters that begins the discussion? How arrogant is that? The truth of the story is, every person emerges into a story that's ongoing. I mean, think about it, Jonathan. Very honestly,
Well,
every person emerges after, and they come to themselves after having already begun, having already adopted cultural practices. No person was there and then began the culture. People emerge out of a culture already underway. That's just the fact of it.
Well, how did it start then? That sounds like a chicken and the egg problem.
Well, there's lots of stuff there. I mean, you want me to get into the gory details? Yeah, there's lots of stuff here. Go read Suzanne Langer. There's lots of different positions about
I would argue,
there was
I
a
suppose.
singing, dancing ape. I mean, there was basically a mimetic, theatrical kind of pantomiming ape that we're a descendant of. It's not that there was one day an ape gave birth to a human. It's that there were cross-fertile species, and if you go back far enough, there was a lineage of the Homo sapien that was cross-fertile with an ape. It wasn't that one day an ape dropped out a human, that there was
Sure.
a mimetic, singing, dancing, pantomiming simian that slowly began to chant, and chanting and singing and dancing went for probably thousands of years, and then slowly discourse as words, and then literacy came thousands and thousands of years after that. So, I mean, a lot of this is very embedded in a very difficult history.